I'm here. Hello. I'm live. Okay. Hi, I'm here. Happy Sunday. Today we have a guest. Have the guest that I had on the other day. Philip from Norway. He goes by Dolbez online. So I'll be bringing him on shortly. And in the meantime, as you know, this is the last day of April, which means tomorrow is the first day of May. And May is Mental Health Month. Um, so I'm going to be doing a different mental health topic each day for the month of May and having different guests on to help me talk about those topics. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking with Kim about trauma and ADHD and neurodivergence. And that's going to be, let me see what time. That's going to be at 2 p.m. Central Time tomorrow. So I'll put up a link for that. So I don't really have much else to say. I'm getting excited for Mental Health Month and kind of focusing all my energy and efforts on that. So let me see if I can get Philip on. 1 second. Okay, I just sent the link. We will see. Oh, he's here. Oh, yeah, he's in comments. Welcome. So, y'all can come hang out in the comments too if you want and talk and chat. Okay, here comes Philip. There we go.
Okay, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh God,
Hello.
that's so much louder than YouTube. Let me just close to YouTube. Okay, let's see. I want to test something. First, I need to change the camera to the classic camo, you know. But I want to
test.
the
phone camera. Oh, you're in a different room. I like that.
Yeah, I'm in my room now.
Oh, that's like
because last time I could. It's the color. Why is it so contrasty? If that even is a word. Could.
So how is it going?
Oh, it's going fine. I was
What time
just
is
away.
It there?
It's 8 o'clock.
8 p.m.
Yeah, 8 p.m. That's too bright. No, that's the wrong direction. That's the wrong way. No. There, maybe. That's better. That's probably better. Hopefully that's better.
I mean, it looks fine to me. The lighting's a little dark, but
yeah, that's I'm lazy. My ceiling light has been broken for like 2-3 weeks now, and I still haven't fixed it. Even though the bulb, I just have it on my desk. I just have.
Oh no!
I'm just too lazy, so I haven't switched out yet.
I can totally relate.
Yeah, but I want to test something because I'm not sure if it's picking up my if it's using this mic or not. If I
does my
you mean the headset mic?
It changes, right? The quality.
Yeah, it just changed.
Okay, so it uses the correct one. That's good.
Because that would be very bad if it used the wrong one, like the inbuilt instead of the actual.
Oh yeah, I did that one day on my stream and didn't notice. And the audio was terrible.
Yeah, never helped. You know, I should have done that. Should have helped you. This time I don't have a desk or stand or whatever, so I'm just leaning. You can actually see. I just have this thing hanging on the screen where I put my phone. So.
That's a neat thing. I don't even have that.
That's it's really useful. Really useful for like breakfast and stuff. Where I can just put it up and watch YouTube. Well, I should probably turn it around so I don't blind myself.
Yeah, I should probably pick one up.
Yeah, I don't know where you can buy them. That's the kind of stuff I've just gotten for like Christmas presents, not presents, but like a calendar like a few years ago, like when I was younger, and I just kept it because it's so useful.
Oh.
And okay.
Well,
and I'm more situated there.
catch us up. What's been going on since last time we chatted?
What? Oh, I did something there. Back. Since last time, well, in my life, I've just been to another city, watched my brother play some sport, but more maybe in regards to what we usually talked about. I began reading up on Jung actually. So I began reading into him, or well, I started with a book by his successor of his, Eric Neumann, I think it was called. He made a book on consciousness where he basically used the method of Jung and all the mythological theories and all that stuff, and he used it to outline the development of human consciousness.
Is it the origins and history of consciousness?
Yes, that is the one. So it's like I learn like 2 new words each page, but so it's really heavy. It's a really heavy book and dense, but that's gonna be my entrance into the literary world of Jung, because until now I've just watched videos on it. So after that, I'll probably read some more Jung, maybe one book, and then I want to read Maps of Meaning, because that's like I'm building myself up to Maps of Meaning. I want
the Jordan Peterson one.
Yeah, I'm building myself up to that because I've heard that one is very dense.
I still have not read it. I haven't read a lot of Jordan Peterson because I've read so much Jung and Northrop Frye and Joseph Campbell that he kind of draws from. Yeah. My friend Trygve from Norway did a series of videos on his channel about Maps of Meaning, where he kind of diagrams it out for newcomers.
That's useful. Maybe so I'll check out. Yeah, that could be helpful.
What are you oh, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, on the topic of Jordan Peterson, I have read his 12 rules of life, although I haven't read it all. I think I stopped at rule 4 or something, but
did you clean your room?
Yeah, it wasn't.
He probably would tell you to change the light bulb too.
He probably would. He definitely would. But I ain't changing that yet. The summer is coming. I have light from outside. I don't need to. Like it's 8 o'clock and you can see in the background. Like you can see the light.
Yeah, it's daylight out.
That's welcome to Norway, where we have really dark winters and really that doesn't help at all.
Oh, that's a lot better. Whatever you just did.
Is it better if I do? If I turn it off. This.
Yeah, it really brightened it up.
Okay, good. Where was I?
Jordan Peterson.
Oh yes,
the rules.
Yes, I read to like rule 4, and on one hand, it's very well written. I like his examples, and well, of course, it's the lobsters. You know, it's funny. He has
the status and hierarchy thing.
Yeah, that's like the beginning of all, and that's where at least I usually think of him as the Lobster King. You know, that nickname, but but I haven't read through the book, and I don't know if I'll finish it anytime soon, because it didn't really touch me in a way I wanted, if you get what I mean. Like, it's not a book I wanted to continue reading. Like, there could be a lot of interesting in it, but I would rather read something else, and so I did. And
that was the Neiman book.
No, that was this. I began reading 12 Rules for Life before Christmas, but the book I instead read, that was the book on death in life, which led to my obsession with death and all the research and stuff. So one moment where I was just, I don't really want to read this book anymore, and I switched, and everything changed, which is very funny. That is interesting. But you were beginning to say something.
Well, I was going to ask you what's your takeaway so far on the Newman book, Origins of Consciousness?
I just finished one chapter, so I'm not far in, but my takeaway is that some things about Jung's theory and all that is, I don't think Like it generally feels maybe it's a bit too esoteric, but at the same time, I love esotericism. It just feels cool, even though I also like rationality. Of course, I am a rational being, but I am. How do I formulate this without sounding dumb and stumbling on my words? So I think we began talking about it last time that I like to write and I'm a bit of a hobby writer, and I do think, at least from what I'm seeing, that this is probably one of the best books to read if you want to write. Ironically enough, like I think a book on like how Jung outlined the mythology or how a student outlined the entire thing, because Jung said himself in the foreword that this is the book I wish I would have written. Like, but I think that is maybe more useful even than an actual like writing help book, because it's more of how stories are structured and how they reach into humanity, or at least that's probably not the goal, but that's how I interpret it, like how the stories can affect us and how we reflect in the stories. And right now, I just finished with Ouroboros, a chapter on that. You know,
The serpent
snake.
that eats
Yes, the serpent that eats. Yes, and outlining basically the beginning. There was nothing time, like basically the womb, like that is what he connected it. Like I don't exactly know why, but it fits so far. But a lot of the old German psychologists, they really like to fit it into like the very beginning of childhood. They include that a lot, but Jung also does that, or well, Neumann does that, and outline basically how like the womb and the start where we don't have anything to think about and all that, that is connected to Ouroboros, you know, and there's nothing to stop it. It's an unending, it's infinite. There's no like, yeah. I haven't thought about, or well, I haven't compiled the information, if you get what I mean, too much. So it's still pretty new in my mind, as opposed to when we previously talked, like the stuff we talked about, I had discussed that a lot in school and over time. So I had like months of preparation and refinement. And on this book, I'm like, not only am I completely new to it, but I also haven't really thought about it yet that much.
So we're getting to see it in its raw form.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool too. What is his, or where do you think he's going with the origin of consciousness? Like at some point, human consciousness. Like I became aware of myself when I was about 3 years old. That's when my memories start. But my organism existed before that, and there was some kind of organismic development going on before the point of actual consciousness. So where do you think he's going, as far as when consciousness a consciousness that we can be aware of arises, are the origins of that?
Well, I feel he began talking about it basically when at the beginning stages after Ouroboros, the next stage when the ego separates itself from the self, because he outlines like the Ouroboros, it's the start and the beginning, and that at the start you have no concept of like the conscious self, you know, the ego, but you're still yourself. So he speculates that in the start, like you are united, and then the end goal of I think it is individuation is to go back to that stage, like integrate all you have done and go back to that stage where the ego and self are integrated. So so the persona and all that and the shadow, all is integrated. And he outlines basically that the start of the ego is the separation from the self, and the ultimate end goal is the integration, it seems, of the ego back into the self. Like, so they reflect each
possible?
other.
Is he associating, like, I call it waking consciousness or conscious awareness with the ego? Is that the same phenomenon? Like when a child first becomes aware of himself, is that the formation of the ego?
That is how I would interpret his writing, but again, I haven't read too much into it. But that is, I think that's what he would outline as the ego. Basically, when you become separate, like the conscious self becomes separate from everything else, like your conscious part, that is the ego. And that is also that is also my own view of it. I would say that the ego could be explained as like the conscious part of yourself. And well, there's obviously more parts to yourself than just your consciousness.
But that's the part that seems most real, and that I identify most with myself. When I think of who I am, I think of my consciousness.
Yeah, I agree.
Ego. I don't think of my body or my autonomic processes or anything like that.
They're an extension of myself. They're not like the true core of myself. And I agree that it is my conscious self that I believe is the most well, the absolute part of myself, the one that is like, maybe I like, even if my subconscious changes, like I get new dreams, new types of content, whatever, the ego, I'm still myself. So I would say that the ego is indeed the most concrete part of yourself, you could say. But that's actually something I wanted to ask you about. Well, maybe not ask, just talk about it rather, about ego and consciousness, because that is actually something I'm discussed in school with a friend. Like, how can you explain consciousness? Because from, well, anecdotal experience, like myself, I do feel as if I'm different levels of consciousness throughout the day. So like, I would separate it into two, like direct consciousness and then automatic consciousness. Like when you really directly focus on it, like if you understand what I mean, when you have that, when you're directly
like
focusing on
active,
something,
like more active
consciousness.
Yeah.
And then you have the other where you're still conscious, you still think, you still do whatever, and you still plan, but you're like automatically moving through the day. And I feel that is not really talked about much. Like there's a lot, at least of how I was seeing, talking about like the separation between the waking consciousness and then your unconsciousness. But I would also think that would be useful to also separate those two, like active consciousness and automatic consciousness, which is how I would define it. But obviously, if there are better medical terms, like, sure.
It may be separated theoretically in some authors. I know in dreaming life, it seems like it's all automatic. You're just the passive experiencer of whatever your dreaming brain is throwing up at you.
Yeah.
But to me, all of that, like every time we're talking about consciousness or describing the gradations of consciousness, that all happens within the ego. And when we talk about integration and self, or even self-transcendence, it's still, to me, happening within this ego consciousness. And so I'm not sure there. I know the concept of ego expansion, as like you read a book, you meet a new person, as you move about the social world, your ego absorbs and expands in different directions based on the stimuli it encounters. But to me, all it does is expand the boundary of what we're still calling the ego. I'm not sure what the limits to it are, or what happens after you cross that boundary, if that's even possible.
Yeah, that is the question. Is there a limit to the ego? Is there something we consciously cannot perceive? Like there's obviously stuff we consciously do not perceive that, for example, our subconscious perceive. Like, at least personally, I don't consciously think of the facial movements when you speak or whatever, but my subconscious does like take that.
So that's what you're calling the subconscious, because I don't necessarily believe in a subconscious in the Freudian or Jungian sense, like this that has an intelligence to it that you can interpret or so. I know there's like we perceive a certain amount of data. We perceive more data than our brain actually processes. So there's this residual data at the periphery that we're taking in, but our conscious mind is just not bothering to process it. So if people want to call that unconscious, I have no problem with that. But I don't necessarily subscribe to the, other than as a metaphor, that there's an actual part of our psyche or brain that's called the unconscious that stores information that we're not aware of, that we can somehow tap into and get intelligence or wisdom from.
I can agree partway, at least the last part where with the subconscious brain storing intelligence, knowledge. I don't believe that either. I do believe that the brain, it has a way of reviewing what information our senses take in, and then basically what should we not focus on, what should be really thought about and what not. And that's
like as we're taking it in.
Yeah, as we're taking
it in.
Or then
retrospectively.
Yes. No, both basically. Whatever the brain, like when I see my keyboard and I want to type something, I don't look and think about the physical keyboard. I think about like the character E or whatever, like what I need. And the brain, I still perceive the keys. And I think that the subconscious, if we are to call the non-ego, like the non-conscious self, it doesn't necessarily have to be something intelligent, but just a part of your brain that processes stuff that you don't necessarily consciously think about. And I do believe that that part of the brain, its processing does maybe hold something that the conscious takes use of without knowing. Like it gives it, I would say that is the source of intuitions. Like the things that you don't consciously perceive, but you still process. And it's that what I would say is intuition. It's like
I could go
yeah,
with that.
yeah, that is what I would define as probably the unconscious, like the processing of information that you can still use, but you don't directly process it. Like it's not me thinking here, like how do I do 5 + 5? How do I do 4 + 4? It's something that still happens. It's not that I just don't process it. It's just that my ego self doesn't process it. And that's how I would probably define unconsciousness, or not unconscious, the subconscious.
Yeah, even that to me would indicate a larger dimension to the self, our consciousness, than just our conscious mind too. Like there's intuition or this processing that's happening outside of our conscious awareness. So what we think of as consciousness is only a part of a larger whole that is the actual self, or our whole self, or our complete self, but that we're not always conscious of or think of as the self.
Yeah. You could maybe define it. Now, I'm thinking this on the spot, so it may be stupid, but
Me too.
yeah. If you think about like sapiens, that is, we can think that is uniquely human. And from in the brain, from what I've seen, well, I haven't seen much, but it seems that there is something with the brain that is very different, or at least works differently than most animals, even mammals. And I would say that is sapiens. But maybe that is only a part of it. That's the part that we call the ego. That is sapiens, and the rest is basically just, okay, you could call it sentience, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I just like the idea that of sapiens, that there is something that is unique to humans, and we can see that is something unique to humans, and that is directly connected with our almost level of consciousness or ability of consciousness. And maybe you could say that is the ego, like
the sapiens.
Yeah, the sapiens is the ego, whilst we still have basically the animal brain, you could say. Like we still have the mammal brain, we still have the reptile brain, we still have the amygdala, all that stuff in the background. Like I don't consciously command like the amygdala. I can't like choose, okay, now go into crisis, now release everything. But it's still there. It still processes on what I see, on my intuitions. It's still me. It's just not sapient me.
Do you think the other consciousness, do you think it's a higher consciousness or a lower consciousness, or is that just the ego bias, or even a clunky metaphorical way of even describing it? Because sometimes it seems to have information greater than what our consciousness is capable of possessing, but then at other times it seems like the more animalistic, primitive part of us. So I don't know if there's different levels or degrees of that type, that some appears as higher and some as lower. But I think about it in relation to higher consciousness. I never know how much trust to put in that part of my consciousness when I do get the glimpses of it and the gleams from it. Mm-hmm. Is it a higher part of me that I should be paying attention to, or is it just the animal part of me that I should let do its thing and not give too much attention to?
I do not think that there is a higher level of consciousness, because if there is, I do think that would be us. Like I do the think ego, that I think the ego is the, you could say, highest level of consciousness, but I also don't, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't focus on the lower parts. Like
I'm thinking of things like intuition that seems to know, sometimes know more than the ego seems to know.
Yeah, like just if you think of like the rest of the brain as the foundation of the ego, like that is what the ego is on top, that foundation still is very useful and vital to us. And I do think that there is some things that, again, like the subconscious, maybe it processes, and intuitions. Like I do think that despite being what you would call a lower level consciousness, that doesn't mean it isn't or shouldn't be focused on. But I also, on the two types you mentioned, like where you feel as if there is some insight, higher level insight or something, I do also think that, at least personally, I have never felt that, at least what I would explain as that. And it seems to me that it's more of a very good like buildup of intuitions. Like maybe you perceive something like days ago that you don't consciously think about, that is perceived, and then that builds up. Like you notice all these things, like that friend frowned a bit too much, and this and that, and then maybe you have, when you have that insight moment, that aha, I have it. That is your conscious mind finally noticing all the processing. Maybe I would potentially that the subconscious has done, but I'm not sure. I'm not a psychologist yet.
But because if you have the intuition that your friend frowned like days previously, it seems like that part of you, whatever part that intuition is responding or reacting to, is accelerated or advanced somehow in relation to the ego that's catching up with it 3 or 4 days later. Like it was perceiving something and drawing conclusions about something long before the ego part did. And in that sense, I think I use the metaphor of higher consciousness.
Or, you could also think of it, or well, you could also say that it's not the subconscious figuring it out before the ego. It's that the subconscious, it finds information, it sorts information that this might be useful, this feels important, and then it stores it, and then it connects it, like let's say makes a web after the, like up in the 5 days before, like of all the stuff that it feels like this may be important, this is connected. And then that insight, that moment of insight, it's not the subconscious figuring it out and the ego noticing, it's the ego seeing and learn the information and figuring it out. Like I don't know which one of those it is, but I'm kind of leaning towards the one I just like outlined, of that it's not the subconscious that just learns it or understands it, it's the subconscious that basically gathers it all, and then it's the ego when it notices that, like instantly, oh, that's what it is,
and then it appears as though
it's as a like moment of insight.
Yes. But like even the like creating the web or making those associations, is that wouldn't that be a form of intelligence outside of sapience, or is it just it seems more than just a random agglomeration of
it's
patterns.
Definitely intelligent. Like life is definitely intelligent, and the brain is definitely intelligent, both in animals and humans. But if for me to define something as a higher power, it must inherently be, well, higher than what you're comparing it with on that spectrum, like on the intelligence. I don't think there's something in the brain that's more intelligent than our ego, but that doesn't mean that the brain as a whole, like the animal brain, the mammal brain, is not intelligent. And so, like, even if someone is, like, you could say they are dumber, that doesn't mean they don't have insight that you haven't learned yet. And I also think that it maybe work on different levels, at least the different parts of the brain. Like you split in the brain in like the mammal, what's it called, the limbic system, which is the emotions and stuff, and then the reptile brain. And those aren't separated just for fun. Like they are separated because they hold different functions. And I do think that the conscious mind or ego, it doesn't necessarily have the ability or the same ability of the amygdala. Like the conscious mind can't alone just like completely shut down the body unless it goes through something else. And so you could say that parts of the brain have more power in certain areas than others, but I don't think anything can match the ego in intelligence.
And I'm thinking of PTSD too. I have PTSD, and so my amygdala is constantly perceiving and reacting to things that my conscious mind has to come in and kind of revise and manage,
like this is
because
it's
not exactly
dangerous.
Accurately matching the data in front of it at any given time. And then I'm also thinking of phenomena like when two egos get together or multiple egos, does that generate some kind of higher collective conscious, like synergistic consciousness from the combined effect of individual egos, like a collective,
like if two people start working together,
or a group of people, like four or five people in a room together talking and generating, and like I consider that a form of ego expansion and generating consciousness, like interchange of consciousness, so that each person's consciousness gets altered or expanded from that. Does that collectively produce some kind of consciousness that could be seen as higher than the individual ego.
I think you could if you wanted define it as that, but I do also think that it's not necessarily something higher. It's just a reflection of those egos. Like, I don't think they merge into something higher, or you can call it higher. Again, I'm wary of calling something a higher intelligence.
Yeah,
It just
we're speaking figuratively. I guess there's part of me or other humans, because I don't seem to be the only one to do this, that reaches for something like that, or wants to maybe believe that the ego is not the endpoint of consciousness. And
yeah, I like that is ultimately, I feel, kind of the goal maybe of most religions too. Like, obviously also the survival of death, like I'm symbolically immortal or literally immortal, like that is obviously a part of it. But you could also say that at least Christianity seems to also hold some ideas of you reach salvation in life, whatever that means, and that could be explained as some sort of betterment of the ego, like becoming a higher self through something you do in life, through evolution, whatever. Like, so I I agree that people always seem to crave, at least many people, I don't, probably some outliers, but most people seem to crave some idea of a higher being. And I'm not an outlier there. I do want there to be something above that can explain stuff, but I haven't been able to, well, think of something or accept something to take that place that I would see it. This seems like the right thing.
yeah,
And even the idea of there being something out there, which I know many people who you would traditionally call atheist hold, that there is, like, I can't explain it, it's none of the religions, but there is something out there. I haven't been able to convince myself of that. And I try to convince myself of that, because there is some, you could say, almost divine relief from the idea that I don't, like, this game of life, it's not just mine to play. I have this tutorial mode, like this helper up there who's going to lead me through it if I make mistakes, or if I fail, I have, like, either I start again or I'm saved. Like, that big dad in the sky, he's going to help me. Like, I haven't, that would be, I would want to believe that. So I'm constantly, well, not constantly, but from time to time, I really try to convince myself of Christianity being real, or of any religions being real, or just the divinity itself, but I haven't managed. The closest I've got is, well, the idea that if you need a higher place of safety, then that would be the collective future or potentiality of humanity. But that also is a bit too, I don't know.
well, you're a good skeptic, that's for sure. I'm kind of there too. I call it the super rational, and I just get tiny little intimations here and there. And I'm thinking of, like, even Jung, like concepts like synchronicity and convergence and coincidences that just seem too coincidental to be random. And but then last time you talked about this, like, immortality
Yes.
narrative that we create for ourselves to kind of to buffer us from the reality of death. Do you think it's just all part of that? Like, it's that just part of the mind's mechanism of generating that immortality
You know,
like sense?
that is ultimately the main reason I wanted to start reading Jung, because I want to try to see if there's a possibility of, like, synergizing those ideas. And like, as you said, is all of this just basically a defense from death, like the realization of death? Is it the other way, that there's something in humans that Jung outlined that motivates us to this or not, or that? And I do think it's connected, that we humans, we reach and we create stories and we do all this for death, and we also reach for this higher being, or higher idea of a higher being for death. But I don't think, well, that that, like, the ideas we create actually give the result. I just believe they give the perceived results. So, for example, you don't really get a symbolic immortality. Like your ego is dead. Like there's nothing to feel good about after you've died, but you in life you have that perceived safety. You don't actually have a safety. Like you're still gonna die if you believe in like I'm a part of the culture. I do great things. I will be remembered. That is a safety in life, but it's not going to help you after death. And I do think we humans reach for that, but I don't think it's any more than a perceived goal or something, because you can't, like, everything will end eventually. Like you can't really, and you are dead. Like it doesn't matter if a memory of you continues, even if that is a worthy goal that I myself am reaching. Like it does give comfort in life, but it doesn't give anything other than that.
So it's more psychology than metaphysic. Yeah, I
would say
tend
so.
to think that too. I mean, ultimately, but while we are alive, I think it's maybe not noble or worthy, but at least interesting to explore and strive for.
Yeah. Well,
why not?
I discovered, well, not discovered, I relearned, because I had known this a long time ago, but I forgot. But I relearned basically the etymology of the word enthusiasm. And that means basically comes from ancient Greece, and it meant like to be possessed by God, like to have divine possession and divine. Yeah. And I do think that, again, to follow what's interesting that could be perceived as something, a divine goal or a dignified goal, because if you are enthusiastic about something, like I do think there's an inherent truth that we humans, we discover ourselves, we achieve, you could almost say, victory in life when we actually have a goal we follow, and be that something, just follow your interests, like, and be enthusiastic about it. I do think that is central. But
yeah, I mean, I know it helps in the mental health work that I do for people to have something like that in their life, some aim to pursue.
Yeah, like it is a centering piece. Like if you have, if you're lost at sea, like you can't get out of the sea if it's in the middle of the ocean. But if you have that island far about, like you have a goal to swim towards. Like it doesn't matter if you just swim endlessly in any direction. If you don't have a goal, there's nothing to reach for. There is no actual safety. Like if you're just trying to be saved without the goal, like you just continue swimming. Like maybe you'll swim into calmer waters, but you're still in the water. And
yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Our mind creates what we need to get us through, and I think like even God and religion, I think, originated in humans, in the human mind, human creativity, human imagination, mythology, all of that. We're the source of it.
That is the theory of TMT, the terror management theory, which is the theory about immortality and all that. That is the theory that their view of the start of religion and culture is exactly the same as the start of consciousness. It is the same start point where we became conscious, what we first became conscious of, and what I would maybe define very broadly as consciousness is that we are aware of our own mortality and our own eventual mortality. And it's from there that we created culture and religion, to give us safety from that consciousness, to be conscious of something, to be conscious of death. And that is the beginning theory of TMT, that is the start. That is where we created culture, religion, because we became conscious, and thus conscious of death.
Now, I know, like on a personal level, when I became, I wasn't aware of death at 3 years old. So my personal consciousness didn't have the concept of death to kind of create against. But consciousness and like personal mythology and a story about life and my family and who I developed, I think, before the knowledge of actual death.
Yeah. I remember, maybe I'm the outlier, maybe you're the outlier. We'll never know until we ask more. But I remember as a kid, like when I was very little, I had a lot of nightmares. I don't remember any of them, but I well, not many. I had a few nightmares leading up to me, like crying, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. And like,
How old were you?
I don't know, maybe 5, 4. I can't
Oh.
remember more than that. And that fact that I ran to my parents and they comfort me like, you're not gonna die, we're here for you. And that is exactly how it is phrased in like the TMT, that as when you're young, like before like 10, 11, 12, like puberty starts, like before that, your awareness of death is dampened by the safety you perceive and see from the world, and be that like the parents, grandparents, just an idea. And well, in most it's parents, that is the most. And then when you reach about 10, 11, 12, that is when you realize that no, my parents are also going to die. Like, they're not immortal. How are they going to defend me when they're gone? And so you basically accept, maybe without thinking about it, but you accept the fact that you're going to die. And that is also, according to them, the TMT guys, that is where you begin finding like true and actual connection to stuff like religion or culture. Like before that, you go through the motions, but you don't really do it for any reason other than the fact that you are told to.
Yeah.
But when you're like 10, 11, 12, like around that time, you begin to actually finding safety in that, because you can't find the same safety in parents, because they are also going to die. So they can't protect you from immortality. No, from death, I mean. And so you go to religion or culture. And through that, you also have the idea that when you don't have anything to hold on to, be that a group identity or culture or religion, that is when your mind is most vulnerable. And that is when like the mental health issues set in, because then you have no shields. Like,
And
I don't
probably
know.
the ideology.
Yeah. Like ideology is definitely a part of that. They talked about ideology a bit differently, as at least fascism and communism, or Nazism and communism, as a form of collective immortality, where basically you have an idea that of like, we are all in this together, we are the chosen people, like this is our duty, and you all follow behind one charismatic leader who can give that collective immortality. And that is how they are, well, tricked so quickly. I haven't read upon the other ideas for how like Nazism became so prevalent, and how like most Germans were Nazis, like legit Nazis. So I don't know how much water that theory holds, but it's the only one I have so far. So it's you got to do.
Yeah. No, I mean it sounds sound on the surface. I'm thinking of my own when I first became aware of death, I'm sure it was I don't think I had a personal encounter with death. It's probably through television or the media or somebody talking about it. And then I was Catholic from until I was about 12.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's more. And then after that, I became atheist and just adopted a scientific worldview. So I don't know at that point how much death motivated me or how much I looked for some substitute for the Catholicism. But for me, it's more. I'm okay with death. I can accept that as a fact. For me, it's boredom. That's what drives me. It's like freedom from the fear of boredom, or the even the actuality, the possibility of boredom. More, that's like a mental death to me that affects me more than the knowledge of a physical death.
That's another point where quite similar. I'm more afraid of basically losing myself and my mind than I am of actually dying.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, me
I would
too.
rather die than stay with Alzheimer's for like 10 years. Like, well, at least Alzheimer's late stage. Like early stage, if you just I forget like where I put my keys, like sure, but like losing myself completely, I almost said deathly terrified of that.
Would you even know?
That's the scary part.
Like,
You
like usually it's the people around you that are most
yeah,
affected, and the person with Alzheimer's themselves is fine.
that is the scary part. Like it is. I probably won't be scared of it if it happens, but up until then, I'm scared of the potentiality of it. Like the potential of that happening, that is terrifying. Like,
Well, maybe
of
you'll
me
be
losing
uploaded
myself.
into a computer by then. You won't have to worry
Well,
about.
is that you or a copy? That's the big issue.
Yeah, I don't know.
And if a copy lives on, that's
I'm
again,
very
it's
skeptical of that anyway. It
yeah,
would just be data, but
yeah.
that's not consciousness.
Like I agree. If there's a way to like extend human life, like I would definitely take it. But do I become immortal? No. I don't think I would
that
want
is
to
a
live
nightmare.
forever.
Like the idea of
Yeah,
immortality that's
yeah.
hell to me. That
But if I could
scares me
get
more
like
than
a few,
anything else. If someone told me you're going to live forever and your consciousness will never end, I would go insane.
but on the other hand, if I could just increase my lifespan by a few hundred years, sure. But
Yeah.
immortality, yeah, no, definitely not. But it is interesting though that why that's a question I haven't really managed to answer to myself. Like completely, why do we humans, or at least a subset of humans, so strive towards like why do I really want to find that immortality, like that uploading
Yeah, because
themselves?
animals
Like,
don't. Like they
yeah.
seem okay with the natural
So
course of things.
it gives some credence to the belief that our consciousness like is at its basis like our us being conscious of death, and that is like it gives some water to that belief if like one of the main differences is what we do in pursuit of not death as opposed to animals. Like animals obviously have instincts, but they don't really proactively go about like trying to extend their life. Like they live their
Yeah. I
life,
mean,
they
they
get
avoid
children,
death when they
yeah.
can, but they don't. They seem to accept that it's a reality at some point. Like it,
Then the question is though,
but maybe it's yes, it's avoiding death, like consciousness of death, but it's also consciousness of life and consciousness and its value, which is why death like we react so strongly to death in the first place, because with that sense of like with that knowledge of death, we have a knowledge of what it is that's actually going to die and the value and how precious that thing is. And so maybe like animals may not be aware of just how valuable and precious consciousness is, and maybe we have that awareness because we have death to contrast it with that we're aware of.
that is I haven't thought of that, and that is a good idea, a good theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but like we can't really know anything like that. And well, as in the lab coat, as Andrew said, like the lab coat fields, like we can't really know, but we can like presume and guess inside a certain range of like possibility. Like I do think I could probably, well, maybe not I, but like psychology does have some truth. Like it can have ideas that can be true from like, but it can't hold the absolute truth.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah. I don't know. Whatever truth we develop is going to be a human truth
yeah,
anyway, from a human perspective. I don't know that we have access to ultimate truth as
and
just
even on
humans.
that, like, is there such a thing as ultimate truth? Like
Yeah,
an
exactly.
absolute truth? Like
Exactly. I mean, right
philosophers
now
have,
it's just a concept that animals don't have a concept of
yeah.
ultimate truth. So it's even the idea of ultimate truth is something that we've developed as humans.
You could maybe say that the animals are actually the ones who hold the concept of absolute truth, and that is reality. They just accept reality as the truth. And if we presume that it is the truth, then us humans trying to change reality, we are the ones who don't accept it
But that
as
seems more
absolute truth.
creative. Like the animal,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
the
I'm just
animals have the secret, if that's the ultimate truth, that seems less of a life that I would want to live or accept for myself than this striving and searching that I do as a human, not having the ultimate truth.
No, I agree. I just that was an interesting. You could flip it, and I had to.
Yeah.
I had to play a little devil's advocate. Flip it around.
Oh well, you know me. I love devil's advocate.
Yeah, me too. It's amazing.
I'm still thinking about what you said about the child and awareness of death, and I know for a fact that I had a consciousness at some point. Let's say
Yeah.
3 years old, and I had goals and stories and like a mythological idea of before I encountered death. So even before the knowledge of death, there was still some kind of mythology, psychology, active pursuit of self-actualization and goals. So I'm still not quite sure death. I'm trying to. I don't know when I first encountered death. Otherwise, I would try to trace how death might have changed that. But I'm pretty sure that preceded my awareness that there was anything called death and that I wasn't going to be here forever.
Mm. And well, your that is true. Like you can't really like no theory is completely correct or has no flaws. But again, on that, like death is you could say the absence of life, basically. That death is the absence of life. That we can agree on that.
Yeah. And like when
and
you first become aware of life, there's not this automatic awareness that it's going to end. You have to
no,
encounter that externally somehow.
well, if I'm actually, let's connect this with what I've been reading by Eric Neumann, who outlined that the first stage of life is, well, it's eating. And in ancient eating.
Food eating?
Yeah, food. Not only food. That's what he talked about, that in ancient, like all the ancient societies, the word eat is in so many ancient mythologies, like from the start. And it doesn't necessarily mean to just eat food, but also to consume something, to take something in. And he went so far as to even like explain the etymology of the word sapiens, which comes from, well, eating. Sapien or sap or something comes from eating. You eat the knowledge. You are consumed by the knowledge. And so you could almost say that, well, if you're not eating, then you're gonna die. And so by eating, you also basically become aware of the fact that you need to eat. And you, even if you don't think about it, that does almost tell you in a way that there is a state where you don't eat. And that state is something you don't want, and that motivates you towards eating. So you could almost, so there could be a primitive death consciousness at early stages, but this is just like this is.
So there's perhaps an intimation of mortality.
Yeah.
Even at the earliest stage of consciousness, even if you're not fully, like your ego is not fully aware of it.
Yeah, but again, like I haven't researched into this field. Maybe they have some new information and new theories that I haven't read. Like the book is from like 2015, 2016. The one
I thought
TMT.
It was older than the Newman book.
No, Neumann, that's from the 50s. But the one on TMT, that's from 2015. So that's like, it's a really new field.
That's very modern to me.
Yeah. And that's why I like it, because it's modern enough that it hasn't really entrenched itself in dogma, you could say. Like there are a lot of fields, it seems like, let's say, for example, behavioralism, at least in the start, like they started scientific method and then they just stuck with that. Like we will only observe what the outside changes happen. We can't really think about the inside. Like that stuck so far that I would go to call it dogma, because it limited like further progress. And of course, you had other fields that went further and progress from their information, but TMT so far doesn't seem to have any dogma. And I don't think dogma is the right word, but it fits.
No, it makes sense what you're saying. So it's probably more fruitful. You can play around with it and experiment more with the TNT. I have a friend who's a behaviorist, and I run into that same conversation. There's a point that the conversation can't go any further because they don't acknowledge anything metaphysical.
Yeah, like if you fundamentally believe that the only way to perceive reality is, well, actually, let's take Plato. Like the only truth in life is not the senses, it's not the outside world, it's the thinking, it's the inside. Like if you meet a person like that and you are not, you don't agree with them 100%, then that is, you will have an upper limit on your what you can converse about and what you can agree on. And it also goes the other way, that if, as you said, if you have a friend who's so like everything has to be empirical, it can't be anything that's soft science, then that also limits conversation. And I do think that that is not in general a healthy way of thinking, that you set like firm boundaries. I shouldn't go further than this, even like that blocks you from potential truth. Like maybe there is nothing beyond that, but like that shouldn't stop your ability from looking at what's beyond, like what is the metaphysical. Like that shouldn't stop you from looking at that and, well, agreeing with it or disagreeing with it. Like you shouldn't put a firm boundary, like maybe a little border, but you should still be able to step over it and look.
I think the boundary comes from adopting the framework itself. Like ideally, you should be able to weigh and consider any perspective and piece of data. But then if you adopt certain frameworks externally, the boundaries come with them. And if you're committed to that framework cognitively, that's where the dogma sets in. Then anything that falls outside of the framework, or that the framework tells you is not part of it, I guess I don't have that psychology. I know a lot of autistic people like to adopt very rigid worldviews, and then they have a hard time being flexible about concepts that fall outside of them. There's also monotropism, which is the attention tunnel, which is the focus we were talking about earlier. But the if you have this rigid framework and you adopt it as more than just a model or a framework, model should be flexible. So if you adopt it as more than just that, if it has like more existential or ontological meaning to it, I can see that might prevent you from. I mean, religions do it. Christian. I'm on a server where there's a lot of religious people. There's Orthodox. There's Christians. There's a few Protestants, and they're debating that, and it runs the same phenomenon where the Orthodox people won't even entertain certain concepts that fall outside of the frame of orthodoxy, and the same for the Catholics and the other Christians and the Protestants. So I think ideology, religion, whatever these worldviews are that ossify into this conceptual dogma, if there's not a way around that or out of that or seeing them for what they are, and then I think you run into that. I've run into that with many people that.
I think it was I know it's there's a quote by Aristotle, but I don't know it directly, so I'm paraphrasing, but it goes something along the lines of a wise man knows how to entertain an idea without accepting it. And I think that's also what you lack if you basically accept a model as absolute truth. Again, like I don't think there is such a thing as absolute truth, at least that we haven't perceived yet. And I think that what is happening is that people get obsessed and accept, as you said, a model, and the brain loves truth. Like it loves finding the truth, and find, like if it perceives this is the final truth, this is the absolute truth, then anything that will challenge that is a challenge against its reality itself, and then it puts up very hard boundaries. Like
I think there's psychological reasons for adopting those models, or letting them reach the status of dogma in your mind.
I've heard a term called is it a keystone topic, or is it a key topic, or let's say keystone topic is probably the wrong word, but basically an idea or belief in a person's mind that it's so fundamental that any challenge to it will be seen as a challenge to the person itself, and thus you can't really talk about it. And luckily I don't have many friends who have what I would say are keystone like ideas that they take in, but I do think that could be equated with a belief in absolute truth, that you believe this is absolute truth.
Do you think we all have, like, we kind of all have those to some degree? Like I think there's a certain amount of belief that we're not pure logic machines, like we're not AI. And so there's a certain amount of belief that we just accept or adopt, probably unwittingly, without even realizing we're doing it, that allows us to continue to live our life, like gives this continuity to our ego. And you could probably examine and analyze and pick them out and tear them apart, but we probably all have things that are more belief than pure rationally derived conclusions that we've adopted for ourselves for reasons beyond more than just rational or logical. Which brings me back to that whole beyond the ego thing.
Yeah, I think there is a theory that the brain and the human mind is split into what you could categorize as two parts: the part that deals with faith and the part that deals with reason. And basically those two, they have different functions, and they also connected to two hemispheres. So I believe the right hemisphere is often connected with the hemisphere of faith, and it's also the part of the brain that's connected with creativity and all that stuff. And then you also have the left hemisphere, which is responsible for the right side of the body, annoyingly enough, and it's responsible for the more logic and the systematic and the orderly, and that is also the fundamentals of the psychological belief in chaos and order. Like I generally like to use those two terms, but basically for me they both mean the known and the unknown, but also they mean faith and reason. And I do think in most humans there's a healthy balance, but you also have those that veer too far to either side, like religious extremism or like super rational people. And I don't mean rational in a good way. Like it's good to be very rational, but I mean like nothing is soft, you could say. Like
They're
and
artistically rational.
maybe I haven't dealt with any autistic people, so I don't know any at least on personal level until so there you have to fill them in, but
I like the Discordians' take on that, but they're both illusions. Order and chaos are both. Neither is completely accurate, and they're both seen from each other's perspective. False and true.
You need moderation. You need to be in the center, centers of the whole.
Yeah, I am a radically enlightened centrist. I consider.
Yes. Well,
I agree.
maybe. I don't know. I haven't put any label on myself for my ideology because I don't like the idea that if let's say I was born like 40 years ago and I labeled myself as a liberal at that time. At that time, at least I believe in America, it still meant like focus on the freedom of speech first and all that stuff, and like generally do what you want, but some restrictions. But now it is synonymous with left wing. It doesn't matter if that's good or bad. Like I don't like the idea that a term I label myself with can change meaning beyond what I myself, like the reason I labeled myself with it.
I know.
So
that's what language does, though.
Yeah, I know.
That happened with the rainbow flag. I won't even use it. They have completely ruined the rainbow. I won't use it as a symbol anymore. I don't identify with it at all.
Yeah, we actually talked about this in school, that at the start, like the rainbow flag, it was perfect. Basically, like the rainbow, all the colors of the rainbow, it represents everything. And now, why do you have a strive for black people? Like, okay, sure, maybe you could say they're oppressed. That you could make a valid argument for that, at least in some way. But then they're not really connected with being gay.
No,
like,
the original rainbow wasn't about oppression. It wasn't trying to identify the oppressed categories.
Everyone,
and now they changed it again. It's even uglier.
Yeah. Well, that is pure aesthetic. Maybe you don't appreciate it properly, because there is a proper way to appreciate it.
That is objective truth, ultimate truth. It is ugly.
I can maybe agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. You should no flag should have more than 3 colors in general. Maybe you can have some extra, but
it's trying to be all things to all people.
Yeah, that is.
Except for a certain demographic.
Except
going out of its way to not be. But
yeah, that is interesting though, how ideology evolves. Like you've probably seen the meme on Twitter by Elon Musk, where like he started at the left side and then the left like went further, and he
the little stick man,
yeah. And there is like that is true. Like there is a lot of water.
That's what happened to me.
Yeah,
my whole party got pulled out from under me and shifted to the left, and I'm sitting here. I didn't go anywhere.
No, what happened?
Yeah, they all went. They got the mind virus.
Yeah, I'm a bit too young to have. Well, the first time I actually thought about politics, probably. Well, I definitely knew about it. Like, oh, that's the prime minister. I saw him in the street. Like, I definitely knew about it. But the first time I really thought about it, that was the Trump election. But at that
even
point,
in Norway,
yeah, like Trump was the most searched man on Google for like 3 years straight, like leading up to and after election. Like, I think he was the most searched man up until Andrew Tate. So for like a good like half a decade, he was the most recognizable and most talked about man in the world. Like we talked about him a lot, but at that point I was more, he sounds funny, he's orange, his hair is a bit funny. I didn't really think about the agenda of the Republicans. And with the Democrat side, okay, Hillary Clinton, she doesn't feel like a nice person, but sure, I don't care. Like I didn't care, but I knew about it. But when I actually began caring about politics, that was probably in like 8th grade. And I'm sad to say I started out on the, well, not much, but a bit on the left side. Like I probably had some you could say, woke ideas, but I didn't really act upon them or think about them. But I do think I started from there, and then I slowly but surely like made my way right. Like, which is kind of funny. I did the opposite. Like, I just made my way right, and I landed where I am now, which is,
So
I would
you
say, in the
actively
center.
did move then.
Yes, I did move. Although, how much of that is like what happened in my life and all the stuff I interacted with me, and how much is just, well, how much of that is just me growing up, like growing up and seeing, okay, we can't really save everyone. Like, Norway can't give enough money to make everyone in Africa poverty free. Like, we can't do that. And like, I feel like, yeah, I moved to the center. I don't, but I started out with some, you could say, almost woke ideas, and then I didn't really care about politics though. Like, I knew about it, I talked about it, I thought about it, but I didn't really care until this year, or well, last year. I didn't really care about it. And that may sound a bit strange, but like, I'm still young. That's like really recent for me.
Well, that's a remarkable amount of growth for somebody your age.
I,
What made you suddenly start caring? Was there an event?
I would say, I think actually when I started caring, not when I started changing, when I started caring, that was when in middle school it came out, and there went some rumors that oh, that teacher, she's a Trump supporter, and then like everyone
In
talked about
Norway?
it.
They had
Yeah,
Trump.
in Norway, like that went behind everyone's back, and like, oh, she's a Trump supporter. Like, I really like her as a teacher, but like, she's a Trump supporter. And at that point, I was like, that this shouldn't impact like how you think of her as a teacher if she's a good teacher. And that was the point where okay, some people take politics a bit too far. Maybe that is something I should think about and care about. And so I began thinking and care about it. I still dislike Trump, and I still dislike him, but again, like, the reasons I dislike him changed a lot. Like, at the start it was just his policies, like, it's evil, whatever, but you shouldn't like shame someone for supporting him, because that's just a person. It doesn't impact how we interact with her. But later, like, the reason I don't like him is because he seems like a very populistic character. Like, maybe what he says is what like people want to hear and should hear, but like, I don't think he has the truth to how to fix it. But again, like, the reasons shifted to, and I would say my reason now is much more sensible than just evil. And so that was the start, when I realized that people actually like let this impact something completely unrelated. And like, so later, like, I learned that, okay, she wasn't really a Trump supporter at all. Like, she just said some of the things he says are correct, but I don't like him. Like, that was what she literally said originally, but that was taken so far because of like political vitriol, like, Trump, hate, evil, thus she is bad, and I can't like her as a teacher anymore.
Well, I can't believe that like Norwegians are using American politics to demonize each other and tribalize.
Like, just as France was the center of European politics, like, there is a quote called by Messerschmitt. Doesn't matter who is, just a very important political figure, probably the most important political figure from the 19th century. But he had a quote that when France sneezes, Europe catches a cold. And I think we could convert that to modern day, that when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. Because I've also personally said that everything that happens in America, it drips down into the rest of the world. Like, that is just because of being the status of a superpower. And not only that, the leading nation in the West, like, everything that happens there drips down. Like, you have talk about like racism and historical slavery in Norway. Like, okay, we had slaves, but they weren't black. They were Irish in the Viking Age. Like, it doesn't fit. You can't really take the issues of America over to Europe in general, but people do. And I think that is a problem. Like, same with racism. Like, okay, Europe obviously has a past of racism. Like, we did justify conquering the world for it, but like, Europe is not, and hasn't been, at least for many decades, like, racist in the level that America was in the 60s. Like, racism is not really an issue
and theirs is
Norway.
Mostly an immigration issue more than racism.
And there are some who does take the racist path and think like, oh, immigrants causing problems, that means that ethnicity and that race must be horrible. That there's some who take that, but the majority are just, why, like, you come criminals, like they're not, there's nothing inherently bad about their physical and biological self. Like, immigration has problems, but it also has benefits. But there are obviously some who take it to racism levels, but nothing like in America, where people like literally think that thousands of black people are killed each year in by police. Like, I saw this funny video where a person went in the streets and asked like a bunch of college students, like, how many black people do you think, unarmed black people, do you think get shot each year by white police? And like, okay, maybe a few thousand. And no, 6. 6 people in a whole year. I think it was 2022. And like, they think it's like in the thousands. Some
it's a narrative.
even said like 10,000. Like, I can't even comprehend how you can imagine that 10,000 people
because they adopt it from social media.
Yeah, and that is a part of that. Politics should not rot your brain. Like, the original idea of politics is so the smart minds of people can go together and like figure out smart solutions. It shouldn't go that politics rot.
Yeah, it depends on an educated populace, which in America we don't like. Education is not as much of a priority, I think, as in other countries.
No, that is a problem. That is a very much a problem.
That is, yes, I agree. It's been a problem for most of my lifetime.
Last time we I checked up some stats. I did get some of the stats right, but the general sentiment was correct of what I talked. Like, the rate of education was a few, like, some percentages off, but like in general, the sentiments were correct. But on that topic, I think I've changed my mind on one thing, and I don't think if I mentioned it at that point, I probably did, at least in some way, like I hinted at it, and that's that our like gender points here in Norway, and that is a cause of something in America. I think I kind of hinted at it, but I don't think that anymore. Like, I've thought about it.
Which point?
About gender points. So, and to get into
with the
further
like
education,
males get more for psychology and that
and females for more for like becoming engineers or whatever. Like, I originally phrased that, I think, as if that is something that came from America and we didn't have on our own. And in some ways, we didn't have it until it started to become like social justice across the world. But I don't think that's America's fault. So I've changed my mind on that, because Norway has a culture of solidarity. Like, that is one of the most important words in the region: solidarity, help other. Like, we should be equal, you know? And so maybe you could say that the social justice movements across the world like that motivated those policies, but they weren't from America. So I changed my mind on that, just to clear the space.
The thing that bothers me about solidarity, and I'm interested in how it contrasts with collectivism, is you need a common enemy to solidify around, and it's this demonizing and of like finding people to demonize and like pathologize in order to achieve that solidarity, when there's not actual reasons to, like, there's not actual oppression going on.
Yeah.
But because they want the solidarity, they manufacture the narrative of an enemy and oppression.
Like, if we take the example of the Soviet Union at their beginning, like, and if you take that idea, like, of a common enemy, like, that common enemy would be inequality. But you can't really fight against the concept, and so you have to find, like, go the logic to its illogical end, and that is that inequality. Okay, what is it? It's that some people, if we look at wealth, are not as wealthy as others, and like, the logical standpoint isn't that the poor people are purposefully making themselves poor. That is not logical way either way. So if you take that logic that there must be some enemy causing this, then the logic is that, well, of course, it's the rich people who have it good. They must have forcefully elevated themselves, and that's why there's inequality. And then you go from common enemy being like inequality, and you actually have something you can go after. And I feel like it's not necessarily the common enemy that's the important part of any ideology. It's the way you get there. Like, how is the logic structured? Because if you just think about, okay, some humans are unequal. That is a problem. I agree, but it's not something I think we can solve. And so I don't think we should focus on it. But if you think fundamentally, let's say the blank slate argument, that you can solve inequality, then you have a common goal. You have a motivation, even if that's illogical. And if you follow that framework, that simulacra, then you have logic that makes sense. Like, that is the problem. Like, if you start with these presuppositions, like let's say that's the simulacra, blank slate argument. If you start with that, then everything beyond that is logical. And that is the problem, because it is logical only if you have that original knowledge. And that original knowledge is very appealing. And so people
that's how we were talking about earlier with the frameworks and the beliefs that we like. It's hard. I think as humans, it's really difficult not to adopt some presuppositions of some kind to just live your life. And once you adopt the right one or two or three, then that whole entire logical framework follows from that. And I think that's how people get locked into these dogmas. And there's social and psychological benefits from it too.
Yeah. And,
so I guess it's being very vigilant about your presuppositions in the first place.
And don't hold them too tightly.
Awareness.
Don't hold your truths too tightly. Of course, if you believe they are truths, hold them, but not too tightly. Like, you have to be able to let go. And I feel like that is not, there's not many people, at least in general. There's obviously some people, a lot of people actually, but in general, it's not something talked about, that when people like, you need to let go, usually that's in the context of, okay, that person has made this choice, you have to let go, they are going away, or that friendship is over, or a person's dead, you have to let go of the feelings, like you have to move on. I think that is forgotten in that idea is that you also have to have the ability to let go of what gives you comfort, even because it may be untrue.
That's
like, you
hard
have to have
do.
that ability. Yeah,
that's that immortality thing that
like,
people hold on to, and sometimes it takes a crisis smacking into reality before you're able to let. And some people, you don't even do it then.
You have to be proven that it's not true. Like, and people can. I think there's a quote, actually. It's a really good quote, so I want to get it perfectly. There's because I am that kind of person that has just a folder full of good quotes. Because, like, why wouldn't you? Okay, so by Gustave Le Bon. No idea who that is, but his quote is good. And you don't need necessarily analyze the content based on the person. You analyze first the content. If that's good, you can like take it as good. But okay. The masses have never thirsted after truth. They turn aside from the evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error if error seduces them. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusion is always their victim. Gustave Le Bon. And I think that...
What's the last part?
Okay, so whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always their victim, like the victim of their ire. Oh. And I feel like that it holds a sort of fundamental truth that if the error, you can say, it seduces us, or if it gives us this feeling of immortality, then who are going to reject immortality? Like, if you have a true and good immortality that you believe in, or if you have that some protection, like, most people are not going to give up that. And that is what I think this quote is about, is that people generally don't give up what gives them comfort, and that's how they, well, as he said, deify error. And I also think that is maybe,
and they rise and fall by that error. And I like the quote. I would say it's all people. They say the masses. I would say every single human being alive.
I agree.
But it's Nietzsche that says error about life is necessary for life.
Yeah, like, learn from your mistakes. Isn't that one of the most important, like general proverbs? Like, you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, and we grow through adversity too.
Yes, and well, deifying error, that's certainly a big mistake.
Yeah, but how avoidable is it?
It's avoidable if you don't have any original presumptions that make that error seem like truth. And that is like, how far back must we go to remove or find that original idea? Like the blank slate theory, I think that is probably the most fundamental part. That I think the blank slate theory is the best candidate for that original idea that gives logic to all of the woke stuff.
Why
I
is
would
that
say
so
that.
seductive? Like, do people want to believe that the environment has that much influence so that they can use that
Well,
to shape?
well, personally, I would very much wish, just as I've tried to convince myself that of there being some religions, I also very much would wish that humanity can become whatever. A person can become whatever. There's nothing stopping you. Like, you are free. You're a blank slate. You can
Like
build
you
whatever.
even talked about it last time. Biology sets the parameter. Like
Yes.
we can't just
Yeah,
morph in
we
anything our
can't.
imaginations want.
But it feels so wrong to not
It feels
believe that
child
we
like
can
it
change.
feels like something a child would. Like when we were children, we pretended to be all
Yes.
cut, but as an adult, it just seems regressive.
But
So you,
that's the point. Like, where does that logic start? And if that logic starts in childhood, what you have in childhood is usually what's rooted the most in your brain. It's like, that is the start. Like, if you behave what you would call childish later in life, if someone behaved like that, to them, that might not be childish if they have held that idea, let's say the blank slate argument, that blank slate idea from childhood, like all their life has been colored by that. And well, they have to give up all their life to move away from it. And well, I don't have evidence on why the blank slate argument is so seductive, but I do have anecdotal experience, and that is, I wish it was true. And I feel like a lot of people wish it was true. And the problem is that some people, if they wish it is true, they kind of start believing it's true. You know, if you tell a lie enough times, like, people will believe it. And I also think that works on yourself. Like, if you continue to think, I can do this, like, I can still do this, like, I can do whatever. Like, if you tell that enough times, you will internalize it. Like, that is, like, in everything, like, repetition reinforces the concept. And I think that is, if in childhood and in adulthood, for that matter, if you really want and it feels correct to believe in the blank slate, then you will constantly be motivated towards that goal. So
I guess that's what I'm struggling with, the concept of how something can feel correct. It's either logically, like correct seems like the wrong category to apply
it
to feeling.
is morals. Well, maybe not morals, but I don't know. I can't really think of it in logic, because in logic, then I would go to see, like, oh, is there something biology stops us from doing? Like, that would be the logical route, and thus the correct would be the blank slate theory is garbage. But like,
I mean, there's no doubt that the environmental factors have an influence on us. I even
no
see
doubt.
that in my work, like trying to find healthy environments and create healthy communities to help mitigate some of the mental health effects. So the environment can definitely be an important factor.
Yeah.
But it's not the sole, and you can't overlook the biological factor.
You can't.
Either.
But imagine though, if we take IQ, which is probably not what most people think about, but that is maybe the best example of this. IQ is partially determined by biology in some way. Like, I don't believe it is as hard-coded as many scientists say, that it's 80%, 90% just biology. But I think a major part is biology when it comes to intelligence. And some people just, at least in general, they can't really surpass that. And if you just look at intelligence, that it is like, it feels, at least personally, completely morally wrong that some people just are dumber than others. And so an idea that everyone has the potential to be equally as smart, that is very appealing, because it feels wrong to believe otherwise. So, and that wrong, it's not on logic, it's based on the other side of the brain, you know, it's based on the feeling, the belief, it's based on like moral worth, like value. Like, it is a value judgment. It's not some logical judgment, it is a value judgment. And you have a lot of those in childhood. Like, during childhood, most people don't really base and judge everything on logic. They do it from their feelings. And again, if we go back to that idea that if you cement an illogical statement as true early, then everything can be built upon that and be logical, even if it's not logical. And that blank slate theory, I feel a lot of people, they take in that idea during childhood because it's so emotionally good. It feels emotionally good to like, oh, everyone can become what they want. Like everyone has the potential for greatness. Everyone can reach to the stars.
Well, I mean, I still believe that. I think dumb people can become what they want if they work, like apply themselves to it. I don't think it's necessarily even intelligence related. And I don't, to me, morality implies agency. So to say that there's something that feels immoral about the distribution of intelligence, it's nobody's fault. It's just the condition of nature.
Excuse me, I gotta check something.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, this has been an interesting conversation. It's a great one to end April on and segue into May, which is Mental Health Month, starting tomorrow with Kim. Trauma and ADHD. What is that logo? Is that part of the chair? I'm fascinated by this little attic room. My bedroom was an attic growing up. I loved it. We had the whole second floor. It was like one big room with the sloped ceilings. And it was cool. Hope he's okay. Like, someone's not breaking in. I'm wondering if that blue is the sunlight or the it's a screen because his curtain was partially open. That could be like the Norwegian evening. It's quite a nice color. I'm just trying to fill in time until he gets back. Really, I don't have anything else of my own to say. I could make the puzzle. I had to start a new one. I forgot to save the one I was working on yesterday, and so it didn't save it for me. So I had to start a new one all over. I picked a different scene. It's like a beautiful blue and purple sunset with the waves crashing against the rocks. It has some nice colors. The colors are very calming. So when I make it, I get the added benefit of these pleasant colors, relaxing my brain. Again, environmental factor. Oh, everything okay? Oh, your mic went out. You're mute.
There. It's better?
Oh.
Yeah, okay,
yeah.
Good.
There's not a burglar or anything.
No, just my family that arrived home.
Okay.
Because I said I was in the city, you know, I kind of forgot to say I got home. So they were like, "Are you home? Where are you?"
Oh.
So I may have forgotten to tell them that I arrived home, which is a mistake.
You need to wrap up?
No, not really. I have time. It was just they just arrived home. Like, I don't have to do anything. Just say hello, you know?
Okay. Well, we can keep going.
Yeah. Where were we?
I don't know. I was kind of chatting to the camera to fill in time while you were going. I was wondering if that blue behind you is outside of your window or is it a screen?
Let's see. That would be there. Which means,
is that the sunlight?
Yeah. That's the bit. That's the window.
Oh wow! I love that color. That's the evening sunlight.
Well, it's not really that color. Actually, you know, you want to see the color. How far can I reach without plugging out my mic? Actually, I can plug out my mic.
It looks like
I just still won't hear you.
It's not even close to evening. You're kidding? Oh wow! What time is it there? Like 9:30?
There, I'm back.
That was a little. That
was something else. What time is it out? 9:30?
Yeah, it's 9:30. So
wow, it didn't.
That's I almost said German. No, the Norwegian
Norwegian summers.
Yes. Well, it's not summer yet, but like our time in the our time in the sun, like how much sunlight we have, like that is very little in the winter. Like I think it goes up at like 10 and then it goes down at 4 or 3 or whatever at like its minimum time sun. But then you also have like 18 hours of sunlight on like on the other extreme in midsummer, I think. Like maybe not 18, but like we are so far north, so that like the Earth, it's bent, and when it's summer, like it's that way, and so we have a lot more sunlight because it hits that way. But then it's the other way, very little sunlight on a whole day. It's like whilst in the middle, it doesn't really matter how you bent; you're still getting a ton of like equal amount of sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
Like so I think equator is like they have like equal amounts of sunlight or darkness, and maybe not equal because the Earth is tilted like 24.5 degrees or something. I'm not sure about those stats, but like the Earth is tilted. So that was a bit of a divergence, but that's fine.
Yeah, I think that was cool. I enjoy that nerdy stuff. I think we were talking about like, well, I was talking about how like the distribution of IQ I don't necessarily associate with morality because there's no agency to it. It's just it's nature. It's like being like feeling morally aggrieved because not everyone has the same hair color or eye color or freckles or something. It's just natural traits, and there's going to be an uneven distribution of them.
Yeah.
So I don't have a moral intuition about intelligence, but you were saying some people do.
At least, okay, if I formulate this right. Okay, so it feels almost, at least personally, tragic. I would say IQ is the potentiality. Like people can still do great things with low IQ. Don't get me wrong. Like IQ is not the biggest determiner. It's not the determiner for life success. Of course, it helps, but like I feel that potentiality, which I would say IQ is, like it expands your potential. Like I feel the fact that is distributed differently between people, that seems almost tragic to me. I don't know why. It gives me an inherent feeling of tragic.
Seem tragic too.
Yeah, and
but nature's tragic.
Yeah, I know, but I often, maybe without thinking about it, and when I think about it logically, I don't. But when I just talk, let the two sides, communicate, I often put together like what is tragic must also then in some way be, well, negatively valued. Like there's something bad about it, and then you can see that it's something good about it not being like that. And so a theory that supports it not being like that is then inherently good and appealing.
Well, that's the human part of you.
Yeah, and I'm actively trying to not be too logical. I'm actively trying to not always be logical. Like obviously I'll be very rational if it needs to be and whatever, but like in general, when I just go about my life, I don't need to think about everything logically. Of course, if there's comes a situation where I need to, I'll obviously go all rationality, all logic. But generally in life, just through my life, I'm trying to tone it down a bit and like have a more balance, because I have noticed that up until recently, I was viewing everything maybe not through almost cold eyes, if you get what I mean. Like, and I would say in general, it is a positive improvement that I've maybe appreciated more. But a side effect could be that, as you said, that at least you believe that it doesn't inherently is morally wrong that nature.
Well, I mean, there's no one responsible for that distribution. Yeah. So there was no agent to hold culpable.
Maybe you're right, but it's just that my intuition, my feeling.
Yeah, and I think and your intuition's admirable. It really is, and I think the ideal is an integration, like learning to balance logic or use logic integrated with the intuition and the emotion and the creativity and all the other parts of the brain.
Yeah. At the same time, if you're too focused on the intuitions, then I don't really think you have in the normal case, then you don't really surpass the point in life you are now. Then if you have to be somewhat logical and rational about life, like you can't just abandon it all. And I don't know.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
agree.
really. Yeah, but I wouldn't until recently. Well, until just now, my intuition had been that religious extremists they have no they only delve into their, you could say, almost belief side, the irrational, then the feeling side. But then I don't think, I think the reason they're fanatical is not because of an extremist, well, belief to the extreme. I feel like it's almost rationality. Again, it's that original presupposition
The
that
presuppositions.
that gives logic to irrational statements, and thus you can use rationality to do stuff that all other people say that's not logical, that's not rational. But they are, to us it seems like they're acting only on faith, only on the feeling side, nothing logical. But I think to them they are in fact on the opposite side. They're extremely logical because everything they do is built on the logic of that original idea.
I've been hanging out with a lot of Orthodox lately, and one of them explained it the other day, and I'm probably not going to get it completely accurate, but the faith is the path to logic. Like once you adopt the faith and the belief, that leads you to the rational conclusions and the logic. So the faith precedes reason and logic, but once you adopt the faith, that allows you the clarity to perceive the logical connections that you need to perceive. And they're highly intelligent people. They're smart. They know logic, they know reason, they know philosophy. So I wouldn't call any of them illogical or irrational, but that all post-dated the adoption of faith for them. Like the faith was the first step to achieving that logic and rationality. And it made sense the way they explained it. And they do demonstrate logic and reason. So yeah, I think you're right. I don't think it is. I don't think they're blind, emotional extremists.
I agree. And well, there's definitely are some emotional extremists, but like I don't think that's the majority.
And even those, I think it's a moral intuition that's being offended and brought into conflict, like with other values. They're not just like raving maniacs running wild and primitive.
I feel that is, well, this is another topic, but that's a conversation. You go between topics. And another thing I've noticed is that people tend to believe that they are the peak of human rationality and civilization, that all people before us, they're dumb, irrational. And I think that is the original presupposition that gives credence to the belief that we are better than them, and well, that they were religious and so they were dumb or whatever, and that's why they failed. And a lot of people actually believe that, like that we were just worse before, like
with religion. Of course,
yeah, no, not only with religion, but just in general, that a human was just worse, dumber, not rational. Like in the Middle Ages, like I've heard some people believe that, they were just superstitious, just following religion, nothing else. Yeah. And I feel that in itself is based on an original presupposition. I hate that word. Based on a religion.
You say prior.
Yeah, but I like the fancy words, they make me feel smart. That's very important to me.
To feel smart.
Yeah,
There's that integration again.
Yeah, but like I feel that idea that we are that those before us are dumb is based on the idea that we ourselves are the peak, and so everything before must be under.
Yeah, that's an egocentric bias for sure.
And well, I do think you should be allowed to be a bit egoistic, egocentric, because
I don't think it's avoidable. I think it's built into our survival as humans. Not to say that a little intellectual humility,
no, obviously
doesn't go a long way.
Like if you don't accept the fact that others may know stuff you don't know, then you will.
That's hard, though.
Yeah, it is very hard.
Humility is hard. I admit, I struggle with it.
Well, okay, I have, well, personally, like mild humility in like small things, super easy. Like that. Okay, sure. I was wrong on this small thing. You were right. But humility on the big things, the ones that you have thought about a lot, that is almost impossible. And I generally in life, you don't need humility in the big things. Like, because most in life, you maybe have one big thing that's a lie and that doesn't really affect anyone else, and it's fine. You hold that belief. And generally, I feel you just need, if you just want to live a decent life, you just need that small humility. Being able to, okay, I was wrong. I shouldn't have driven that car that way. But at the same time, like, if you're engaging in anything other than just living, like, you need to be able to at some point accept the fact that others may be right on big things and you may be catastrophically wrong.
I know, but I don't want to. If they were right, then what's the point of me and my rightness? I don't want them to be right. I want to be the one to be right.
Like, I feel like most people, when they like will point to extreme humility, like we'll look at all ancient world, like, okay, Jesus, he was literally provable, and he could prove himself as the Son of God, and yet he sacrificed himself and whatever. If you believe that is of course humility. But I think a better example, a more modern example, is there is this researcher who did, I think it was the 70s, 80s, 90s, somewhere around that time, who did research on wolves, and he outlined the theory of alpha wolves, beta wolves, and all that. Yeah, and he later came out that I was completely wrong. That was just like parents. And I think that is a perfect example of the capability of humility on a big scale, because that was his life work. He had worked on it for like a long time, and I was wrong. I was completely wrong. And I think that is a very good example of what we all should strive to be. Like, be enthusiastic about what you do, but when you do something wrong on a small scale, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't affect anyone. On the big scale, like, you have to, like, you have to fix it up. Like, it's like you have to be.
We're all doing something wrong. Otherwise, there'd be no growth or development at all.
Like, if we, on a small scale, it doesn't really matter if you pour the milk first in a cereal and then the Cheerios, or opposite. Like, obviously, pouring Cheerios first and then
pour your cereal first.
Yeah, that
is. People pour milk first. No, that is wrong.
Yeah, that is wrong, but it's a minor thing. It doesn't really matter. So it's fine. Like that. Okay, sure. It's something you just do. Doesn't matter at all. Fine. But if you think that, oh, women can't think, I have to think for them, you have to be able to admit that I'm wrong, like, or at least switch your belief. And now we've repeated the same thing multiple times, but
yeah, I used to be that way I had that happen with religion. I used to think religious people were stupid and regressive and just not as enlightened and logically advanced. And I have an enormous respect for religion. I see it a completely different way. I don't see them as stupid. And I had to go through that process in reorienting my relation to religion.
And that is another point where I like, apparently, because I also grew up I would still call myself an atheist. I don't know if I would call myself an agnostic, because I've tried to prove to myself. So I don't think there's something out there. So I am an atheist on that level. But at the same time, like, if it, like, I'm not gonna like force you to stop being religious. But I also start with the belief that religion, stupid. Like, you believe in a little sky daddy up there who gives you credits. Like,
it's just illogical.
And then now I admire religion. Like,
there's a great value in it.
Like, if we could have, like, I would rather live in a society as an atheist in a let's say a moderate Christian society as an atheist than a Christian in an atheist society. Like, I wouldn't mind if Norway became more Christian, as long as it didn't go too far, like some things in Christianity, not so bad, not so good, but like generally following like the Christian ethic and stuff, I don't think it's that bad. And I think if people find worth and value in life from that, then go for it. And I wouldn't be opposed to living in a society that is centered around those ideals.
Yeah,
although I would still be an atheist.
Christian nation either, a culturally Christian nation.
Yeah.
As long as I still get my freedoms respected.
And I agree. Like, freedom first, then everything else.
Yeah, because you need. I work on the individual level mostly, and then the community level, which is like smaller groups of the Dunbar number, about 250, makes a good community.
Yeah.
But on a larger scale, society, state, that level, there's something that you need to organize that number of people beyond just what a community is able to do, and something like a religion or a shared narrative or shared belief structure is almost essential.
That is almost, well, that belief is kind of maybe you could say proven by the period in Europe, probably also America, but well, I'm European, so I've learned about it from the European perspective. In like 1820 to like 1890, whatever, like the period of romanticism, where people, where people like they needed a guiding principle, like religion was going down. Like, of course, people are still very religious, but the fundamental guiding force of religion had stopped. Like, religion was now a personal thing, not a state guidance thing. And so they had, as you said, find a narrative. And I think romanticism and national romanticism following that is probably the best example of human societies trying to find that central narrative and forging their national identity around that narrative, and that using that as a guiding principle.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that now with the woke. Although I would if we have to pick a narrative, I would much prefer the Christian or religious one over
I agree.
Their version.
I completely agree. I agree. Although, again, I would prefer the Norwegian narrative above everything else. But
which one is that? Is that a Viking narrative? Viking history?
No, there's a lot in Viking society that's I would not want. And there's a lot in the medieval Norwegian societies I would not want to have, but some principles of Viking society, at least when I analyzed the text, Gunnar Gormstunga, which is, well, it's a saga, a Viking saga. And when I analyzed that, and I found some central traits that seem to be common to Viking culture. One of them, brave. Like, you have to be, not brave is the wrong word, courageous. And that is very annoying because there is a slight difference between them, and I've forgotten the difference, but I remember that I searched up the difference. Courage is better. But you have to be courageous, and you also have to, have the ability to speak your mind. Like, Viking society had, you could almost say, definitely not democracy, but they had some form of democracy with the things, basically, where all people in the region would meet up, all the elders, some people are chosen, like, you go meet up there, talk about your problems, we'll discuss it here. You still have chiefs and kings and stuff, but they were more of the judges on that thing. And in that thing, you talk about basically democracy. You vote on what to do, like, what should we do? Like, I have an idea. I want to build ships to go there. Okay, I will follow. I agree. You basically had a primitive sort of, maybe not democracy, but it was the beginnings of it. And in that was the idea that to get anywhere, you not only had to be courageous and stand for your opinions, say what you mean, but you also had to have the ability to eloquently say what you mean, which is there was a virtue in Viking society to be a skald, basically a Viking poet. Like, that is what it is, a Viking poet, a skald. That to be a skald was virtuous. You could paint your meanings and concepts in such beautiful words. That was very virtuous, and I think that reflects kind of on how important it was to not only be courageous about what you mean, but also to be able to, like, channel that and show that to someone, like, and that actually put that forth as something valid and logical or rational or whatever, and not just, I like boats, but have to paint the narrative. Why do I like that and all that? Why is it so good? And then the third thing I analyzed and saw from that story, and that is negative, something I think we should maybe push away, at least in some way, in today's society, and that is fickleness. Basically, that it basically means that you always change path. You don't really stick to what you have chosen. Like, you switch back and forth, and it's not that prevalent in Norwegian society, but it was very frowned upon in Viking society. And I think that is something that should come back, in at least in some way, that once you've gotten to it. Like once you've chosen something, try to stick with it a while. Like don't just switch work every year. Like try to stick with it a while and see how do you improve and like actually work. So those three are things I would say we should basically take back from Viking society. I haven't analyzed like the later Norwegian
To become
societies.
less fickle? Or
Yes, less fickle.
like commitment, or I know.
Yeah,
like,
be committed to what. Like I like the word fickle. That's why I used it. Like I could say be more committed, but I like my fancy words, you know. And
less the eloquence.
yes, and well, it's those three, you know, courage, not bravery. I'll check up the definition later, but there is a difference, and I think the difference. Well, that is a problem, though. I don't know if there's different in English, but there is a very definite difference in Norwegian. Actually, because Norwegian and has a lot from Viking society, and we focused a lot more like courage and bravery. That's probably what you think about it if you think about the Vikings. You know, that swordsman who stands with his sword, like runs into conflict. Like that is
Yeah,
probably,
they were like barbarians and conquerors.
Yeah. That is probably what you think about, and it's not like wrong, but it also misses the point that Viking it was a society. It wasn't just barbarians. Like obviously they were barbarians, but at the same time, like you have, well, okay, there is a funny story. I'm diverging a bit there, but it is a very funny story, and that is an English priest in like the 9th century. He was basically writing, and we have his writings, and he was complaining. You know what he complained about? He complained about all the women. They were all the women of England, all the Anglo-Saxon women, were flocking to the Vikings. And the reason why, because those filthy barbarians, they washed and bathed every day. Like, and that he was angry, but because the Vikings, they came, they were washed and took care of themselves, and thus the women came to them. And so you have this priest just writes, sister writes, I hate this. This is horrible. Like we have to, like that can't do. And they're stealing our women with their cleanliness and barbarianism. And that's so funny because it's like, even though the barbarians, like that doesn't mean they're well, okay, barbarian does mean you're uncivilized. Even though they're barbarians, that doesn't mean there's nothing good about them. Like they clean themselves a lot.
Well, it technically means you just don't speak the language of whatever country is labeling them as barbarians.
True enough. Although I would kind of call a tribal society like Viking Scandinavia like a barbarian civilization compared to like medieval and feudal England. But you could also say just.
I don't know if those English people are not taking a shower.
No, I agree.
Barbaric.
Well, they did wash. It's just that it's very big, very long between each wash, you know, and apparently enough that the women like they just flocked in droves to the Danish and Vikings, which is very funny because I can just imagine this priest, this old gangly priest, we know, with bald spots, sitting there in this basement of this church. Like in the morning he's praying like, oh God, and whatever, and now he's sitting like, I hate Vikings, they steal our women, they're too clean. Which is, yeah, that was a bit of a divergence, but it was worth it.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know, is there anything else you want to wrap up with or close with?
Other than I really like to come in some other time, but
I'd love to have
you. In a while.
I mentioned that tomorrow's May. It starts Mental Health Month, so I'm trying to do a topic a day on mental health. So if you want to come on and talk about psychology, but if you can't make it in May, you're welcome to come on after that. That
is a bit on maybe next year's May, because then the psychology I will have next year, that will focus on mental health, and that's like, I will probably have a lot more to contribute like next year, not only like because of a year worth of just experience in general, but also because then I will have gone through psychology with a focus on mental health and mental problems and whatever. So
wow, I can't wait for that. Well, if you want to come on in June and talk about mental health, I'm not going to say no. So don't feel like
it's a
standing invitation.
Yeah, But at the same time, I think I said in the messages that May and June, that's kind of exam period. So I don't study that much, but I still I can't stay up that late. Although it's not that late now because, well, luckily you pushed it earlier a few hours. But like, if it had been the normal time, like I couldn't have done that because I had to sleep. Like I have to be ready to school. I value my sleep very much so, and
Well,
yeah.
definitely prioritize your academics and your sleep for sure.
And I'm doing that. Even if this is interesting, well, I want to become a psychologist. I can't do that without actually caring about school. And I think it's a good time to end it, especially now that the light's starting to recede. It gets darker and darker.
Yep. Okay, well, it was another great conversation. I sure appreciate it.
It was a pleasure talking.
And I wish you well on your last couple of months.
Thank you. And we'll see and talk another time, probably in the comments.